Thank you, Rob, and welcome everyone. Today, I welcome all of us to our open table where we make connections with one another as we respond in multiple ways to the crisis of homelessness in our communities. We acknowledge that we gather on the traditional homelands of the Puyallup tribe who've lived on and stewarded these lands since the beginning of time and continue to do so today. Beyond this awareness, we call ourselves to uplift the voices, experiences, and histories of the Indigenous people of this land and beyond. Today, we'll be learning about advocacy for homes in Tacoma for all. We'll consider the costs of various shelter housing options. We'll be reminded of last week's conversation about support for people in vehicle homes. We'll discuss responses to next week's heat wave, and we'll talk together about how best to deal with the continuing reality of encampment sweeps throughout the city of Tacoma and Pierce County. In considering our potential actions, I think we can hold two seemingly contradictory assumptions. First, that each of us, at all the different levels of power and decision-making, are responding to this continuing crisis in homelessness according to our best lights. And second, that each of us at all levels can demand much more of ourselves, other residents of our communities, and our elected officials. We can stand up taller with unrelenting demands. We can continue to remind anyone in earshot that the humanitarian crisis will not be mitigated with humane approaches to removing people from one unsanctioned area to another when there are insufficient options to meet the need for shelter. It's the value of connection I want to point out today. What will I learn today that can lead me to take new action today? And who will I ask to join me, or who will I join? In the early 1960s, a young African-American poet, Lucille Clifton, wrote of a brief, image-filled connection with Miss Rosie, who mirrored the experience of many of our unhoused neighbors today. I offer Clifton's poem to honor these neighbors, struggling each day against nearly impossible odds, and also to center us on our connection with them. Miss Rosie, when I watch you, wrapped up like garbage, sitting surrounded by the smell of 2 old potato peels, or when I watch you in your old man's shoes with the little toe cut out, sitting, waiting for your mind like last week's grocery. I say, when I watch you, you wet, browned bag of a woman who used to be the best looking gal in Georgia, used to be called the Georgia Rose. I stand up. Through your destruction, I stand up. I invite all of us today to stand up if we stand, or take a position if we sit. I invite all of us to stand up just a little taller as we dare to do what hasn't yet been tried. So welcome to our meeting today. And just so those of you who are new know how we carry on here, we are on Zoom, so we ask everyone to stay muted when you're not speaking and to keep your video off if you're doing other activities that might be distracting. We ask that you use the raise hand function to get attention that you'd like to speak. And if you don't have access to that, if you're on phone and want to speak, just do something then that lets some of us know that you would like to speak, and we'll make sure that Rob gets that message. Also, we do have a number of community norms that we developed early in our time together. And so Rob usually puts those in the chat, so you can check those out there. And we ask that everyone pay attention to the fact that we want to lead with racial equity lens. We look around and see who's here and celebrate the diversity we have, but acknowledge that we have a lot of work to do as a group of people from various backgrounds to ensure that the disparities around racial inequities are dealt with in our group and in the community. We want to be aware of the power dynamics among ourselves. Some of us have hung around a lot, and so we talk a lot. Some of us don't get to talk very much because there are right now, almost 50 of us here. So pay attention to that. So to speak up if you haven't spoken and have something to add, make our connection real, help others learn from the experiences they may not have had. And if you talk a lot, Ty, today to sort of step back a bit. So I think with that, I'd like to welcome anybody who's new. One of our traditions here, and it's not terribly fair to you if you're new, but you'll get a chance to meet some other people in a small group discussion a little bit later. But if you're here for the first time or returning after being away a while, this is a good time to just announce that you have joined us. Let us know your name and a group that you may be part of. You can also put this information in the chat to help with connections later. And that reminds me that I should just also say, we do use the chat for networking purposes during this meeting. We save the chat so it's available to you if people put email addresses or other contact information there. And it's not disrespectful to use that time to talk with others in the group through any private conversation or general conversation. So with that, if there's anyone new, that just raise your hand and will be recognized for you to say who you are and what your group is if you have one. Yes, Lee. I think you're on mute still.
Sorry. Good morning. I'm Lee Williams, and I'm a faculty member at Bates Technical College, but I'm also Department of Corrections Reentry Navigator, representing Bates Technical College, Clover Park Technical College, Pierce College, Puyallup, and Green River College is where I generally will work with my reentry, formerly incarcerated students to reenter the college environment. And
welcome very much, Lee. We really look forward to having you with us, and I personally would like to connect with you. So if you could put your contact information in the chat, that'd be great. Mary, and then thank you, Mary, and then Elizabeth.
Hi, my name is Mary Poupart. I am a coordinator down at the Tiny Homes Project at the Puyallup Tribe. Just recently started here, and I'm looking to move up to that outreach referral coordinator. So this is, I chimed in here to try to get some feedback and some resources to see how all of you work. So I'm very new to this program and very new to the Homeless Coalition. So.
Well, you're very welcome here, Mary, and we look to learn from your experience as well. Thank you for
coming. Mary, welcome. It's great to see you.
Hi,
all
Tracy.
All right, that's great. Elizabeth.
Good morning. I'm Elizabeth Powell. I work for Tacoma Pro Bono as a staff attorney in what we're calling the HELP unit, which stands for Homelessness, Eviction, and Legal Prevention. So we have a little bit broader mandate than the attorneys that are just doing the right to counsel, which is to appear on behalf of persons who are income limited who are facing eviction. So with a little bit broader mandate, I have the ability sometimes to help with people in different situations who are being excluded for reasons that don't actually start with the landlord going to court. So I am this week dealing with a number of different people, probably 4, who are abruptly homeless in Pierce County, and I'm just stunned at the lack of resources for them. So that's why I'm here. I want to learn.
Well, welcome very much, Elizabeth. We look forward to hearing about that program and contacting you about resources too. Yes, Rebecca.
Hi, you guys. I've been here a couple meetings now, but I've had a few issues and sick kids. So I just wanted to say hi. I'm with Ideal Options. We're a medicated assisted treatment program. We help with methamphetamine use, opiate use disorder, and alcohol use disorder. So my job as a peer is to actually be with the people. So I get to go a lot of the times to the encampments. I get to meet with a lot of people from different organizations to really try to build that relationship and friendship so that when I'm out there and somebody's ready for treatment, I can create that wraparound service. So that's kind of why I'm here. I'm here to learn too. I'm fairly new. I have lived experience, 3 years clean and sober. But yeah, that's what I'm doing here.
That's great, Rebecca. Welcome back and welcome to us for the newest stuff that you bring. And we'll look forward to hearing about the program too as you go along.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. If there are others who are new and would like to introduce yourself in the chat, we'll be delighted to have your contact information. And thank you to all of those who introduced yourselves today. We're really delighted to have you join us, and congratulations on the clean and sober life that you're described, Rebecca. That's really great. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosemary, for getting us started. And let's move on to the next standing item that we cover every week. And that is the This Week on the Streets segment. The purpose of this segment of the meeting is to create space for folks to share what they're seeing changing on the streets across the county. Updates related to where folks are moving and what needs exist. And so this is a free and open session. Folks can raise their hand and I'll call on you, or wave your hand, or just get our attention somehow. We'd love to hear what you have to share with the group.
Well,
go ahead, Richard.
I'll post. I did post earlier in the week, sort of a update on several encampments. But thank you to everybody that was at the 7th and Tacoma sweep this week, especially the Lived Experience Coalition. That was really ideal, both on the first and second days, as far as interacting with people. I was able to have a lot of conversations with people being swept. And anyway, the presence of people there to witness a sweep was valuable. The Milwaukee sweep is pretty much concluded. There's a couple of stragglers, but they have put NIMBY blocks along about 1/2 to 3/4 a mile along Milwaukee. They've authorized up to $300,000 to buy these concrete blocks. A number of campers have shifted maybe 1/2 a mile to another street in the tide flats, so it's not really an effective moving of people out of the port environs. And then I'd say roughly half of the people under the 11th Street bridge are gone. People are working on their vehicles, preparing to move, and so that continues to be underway. And I suspect that probably not all of the 7th and Tacoma sweep will be completed today, but it's making progress there. People are leaving. Some are still packing up, getting their spaces cleaned up, and some are just looking for new spaces. So people are scattered about town, and that is continuing on its way. So I'll put my update in the post too. So a number of other, just general on encampments at 15th and Yakima has grown. Others are continuing to grow as these sweeps continue and people are moved out and displaced. And so as they look for new places, it's increasing the size of the encampments and therefore changing the on-the-ground culture that's in place when that happens. So a lot of that going on. And then watching the weather report next week, and I'm sure we'll get to a discussion of water sometime in this meeting. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. And you're right. I would expect that we'll talk a little bit later in the meeting, especially I don't see Jeff Rogers on the call at the moment, but I believe he'll be here later. We'll do some updates about the hot weather response. I will say that if you look at the pchomeless.org website, we've enabled the little highlighted section to talk about the upcoming hot weather, and that includes a link to a page with basic information that I will maintain throughout the week next week, unless the county decides to do something else for us to point to, that shows where water is available as well as cooling centers, as the temperatures look like they will get into the 90s and above, maybe even approaching 100 next week in the middle of the week. So Thank you for that update, Richard. Anyone else with observations and changes on the streets this week? Teresa, have you seen an inflow of folks from 7th and Tacoma into your neighborhood, since that seems to be a landing place for a lot of folks?
It's actually kind of hard to tell because there's not, I mean, people are wedging their tents in between cars, and it's been happening for a while. So I will be going out again next week, all during the week, to deliver water. So I will know more then. But I did want to say, the lived experience crew that showed up on 7th and Tacoma were really pretty amazing, and makes me want to strengthen our partnership with them. They went out amongst the campers and I don't know, it's hard to describe how it is. And it was great to see Timothy there, and Jan and lots of other folks. Anyway, I want to thank Richard for being such a squeaky wheel, and everyone else for showing up.
Thank you, Teresa. Courtney, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. First, thank you for the kind words regarding the LEC, the Lived Experience Coalition, from both of you or all of you that have said it. And we've been also checking down under the Murray Morgan Bridge and continuing to help the people who are still under there, but still getting drive-bys by police officers. And also Laurel from NCS says that the next sweep will be 13th and G Street, but she doesn't know when it'll be posted. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that insight, Courtney. I don't think that's a surprise. As a reminder, so the city of Tacoma reaches out to the coalition by emailing and calling me when a new encampment sweep is going to happen. So if the notification of that comes, I'll let the coalition know through our mailing list as soon as it happens. My hope would be, with the sheer number of people who are on G Street, that it won't be like a 72-hour or 1 week notice, because there's a lot of folks who need help that will need to find somewhere else to go. Jay, your hand's up.
A lot of the people that we talked to, that I spoke to on a few occurrences, were talking about breaking off and going to different directions instead of full-made camps. They were not looking to create or to go to something that's already established, because they're all full. So a lot of them were breaking off to new sites that aren't there yet, or old sites that are clear right now.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think that is consistent with what I've seen as I've been out around the city, and what Richard has observed as well. So any other final observations or thoughts for what folks are seeing on the streets? If you do have other information to share, just a reminder, please do use the chat as a resource. As a reminder, we do post both the transcripts and the chat from these meetings on the pchomeless.org website. So that's a resource that we want to maintain for the community here. And so the chat is that community resource, so please share. So let's move to our community spotlight for today. And it's going to be a little bit longer community spotlight than usual. I want to thank Ty Moore for rejoining us. We couldn't squeeze the conversation into last week's meeting, but I'm glad you're here this week to talk about Home in Tacoma for All. So Ty, I hand the floor over to you.
Really appreciate it, Rob, and all of you all for taking a few minutes out of your meeting to discuss the work we're doing, and hopefully, open further space for collaboration. So Home in Tacoma for All emerged out of a project of Tacoma DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, originally, though now it's sort of developed its own independent life. But we were we were advocating in favor of the Home in Tacoma process of the redistricting, shifting of the zoning laws to make it easier for more homes to be built in the city. But we also did that with a recognition that just letting the private market rip, just opening up new zoning options by itself was not going to be sufficient to ensure increased affordability, to fight displacement, or to ensure sustainable green development to meet the climate crisis in our city. And so we developed, in dialogue with folks in the Planning Commission, in dialogue with people in other cities who've dealt with similar rezoning processes, developed a platform of demands on Tacoma City Council, and saying, if you're going to pass Home in Tacoma for All, it should include the following. I'm going to put in the link, the petition around those demands. And Home in Tacoma for All, Home in Tacoma Phase 1 passed last December, as I'm sure everybody's aware, and we're currently in the process of Phase 2. The Planning Commission, we originally developed this to try to influence the Planning Commission's process this spring of community input in April. It culminated in a vote in early June, where they are basically saying these are the policies that the contractors and the city staff should be studying to include in Phase 2, and things are also, of course, left out. And so we wanted to influence that process. So we developed this platform in order to do that. And they have, as part of their 10 points that they're looking at in Phase 2, they have a bucket of issues around affordability, around anti-displacement, and around sustainability, among the other 10. And so our demands were developed around that. Now, of course, we recognize, we wanted to push the envelope. If you look at the package overall, I'm not going to get into all the details. They're based all on things other cities have done, but they're pushing the envelope. And I think it would require, I don't think the city's just going to do it based on lobbying efforts alone. It would require kind of a rethink of the role of local government in a significant way, and I think a real grassroots movement. And that's the other side of what we tried to do. Through April, we had petitioning teams, starting in April, petitioning teams out all across the city, farmers markets, walkable neighborhoods, et cetera, collecting signatures around this platform. And to date, we've got that kind of slowed down after the Planning Commission process ended in early May, but we've picked it up again. And to date, we have well over 2,000 signatures, about 500 online, but mostly paper signatures, and are developing trying to develop out of that a grassroots base, an email list, et cetera. We had our kickoff meeting in April with 120 people. I think some of you all were there. We had a activist organizing training all day in early June that brought about 40. And right now, what we've decided to do is to sort of split into 4 committees to work on different projects. One is continuing to be a lobbying and lobbying committee that is working closely with city council members, planning commission members to try and push some of these policies through. Some of them are being considered and looked at. The second is a tenant organizing committee. And that's, I think, quite developed in quite an exciting direction. We just came out of this week, the UFCW Local 367, it represents 8,000 grocery store workers, has agreed to partner with us. They just gave $6,000 so we could hire a part-time staff person to work with their members. So we're going to launch a website that's dedicated toward union members, but also anybody who who's facing excessive rent hikes, eviction, or slumlord conditions and wants to organize to fight back. They're going to survey their members, make sure their shop stewards and all the Tacoma area grocery stores know that their members can approach us if they're facing eviction or rent hikes, and work with our volunteer team to do intakes. Some people will just need legal assistance. We hope to work with Tacoma Pro Bono. Others will need other simple forms of assistance, but some will be in a position to organize fellow tenants to fight back against the rent hikes, to fight back against slumlord conditions, to fight back against unjust evictions. So we're hoping to expand that to other unions and community groups to similarly survey their membership. If anybody here sits on a membership list with people who maybe face a lot of renters and would like to work with us on that, we would love it. And finally, we have a community outreach committee that is continuing to do petitioning, volunteer recruitment, et cetera. Our hope and our analysis is that we're not going to see large scale policy solutions by lobbying and sort of moral persuasion alone. It's going to take building political power. It's going to take building a powerful grassroots movement. So we see the tenant organizing work as feeding into the policy and lobbying work to try and build the scale of movement that's going to be necessary. Certainly, we don't have any illusions that our project by itself is going to be sufficient. We want to work in coalition with all of you, with many others, to make sure that we have, a city that is affordable for the people who live and work here, to make sure we have programs to phase folks out of homelessness, and to make sure we have a way to build enough affordable housing that we know the private market by itself is not going to do. So I encourage people to look over the platform, sign the petition if you haven't already. And I know Zev is going to share some of the social media handles that we've launched. We're going to launch a website very soon and a fundraising drive to be able to sustain ongoing part-time staff positions to be able to develop this work. So any support you all would be interested in offering would be excellent, or any collaboration you want to explore.
Great. Thanks, Ty. So do you have a moment to take any questions from folks?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, Jan, I see your hand up.
This week there was an article in the Tacoma News Tribune about a hilltop church, specifically with Shiloh Baptist, which is the first time I've heard local attention to the impact of gentrification on our homeless population, or just squeezing people out of homes. Are you working with, and there's a second church that was mentioned, are you working on that level with property owners that might be faith-based that might be able to offer more affordable solutions?
I want to make sure I heard your question right. You were asking not about, are we working with faith community? You're asking specifically, are we working with like developers who are
or anything to include the faith-based owned solutions? I mean, that seemed to be a pretty creative and public way of addressing the issue. Are you associated at all with the gentrification and the fact that there are faith-based owners of property in challenged areas?
We have some folks involved in different faith communities and have talked about the need to do a lot more outreach in the faith community to try and build support for the platform and build connections. But I got forwarded that article. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, so we're not directly connected to that. We do, one of the main policy issues that we are exploring and urging the city to explore is building a social housing developer, which I don't know if that's exactly in your question, but it's a model that's used internationally quite extensively. Vienna is sort of this example where they developed it many years ago. 60% of Vienna's rental housing stock is public, but it's not like warehouses for the poor. It's like mixed income communities that people then creates a tremendous amount of stability, et cetera. Anyway, so we're in dialogue with Tacoma Housing Authority and some of the nonprofit developers. I'm not sure exactly what different folks in the faith community are doing around that, but to explore, could we bring in something similar with that, maybe looking at land trust models. So tangentially, that might be around your question.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Ty. And anyone else with questions for Ty? So Ty, could you put your contact information in the chat? That would be fantastic if folks want to reach out. And then feel free to come back and attend at any point if you feel like this group could be helpful in some way to move your work forward. And Zev, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add something really quickly because this Home in Tacoma for All is a coalition project and includes Serve the People, and also the Lived Experience Coalition is also working with us on it. Yeah, I just want to say that we're here, weekly talking about like trying to open new shelter space, and all that sort of things. And the fact is that rent went up on average in Pierce County last year 22%. And if rent goes up even 10% on average for the next few years, we're not going to be able to open shelter space fast enough for all the people who are going to be becoming newly homeless. So I mean, there needs to be a point where we, stand up and say like, this is a problem with how the city is run. We need to stop, uh, how quickly rent is going up.
Yeah, thanks, Zev. And Jay, I see your hand up.
I talk to a lot of people in the community, and as I talk to these people, gas station workers, clerks at stores, people that work our essential jobs, the most common comment in the last month and a half has been, Jay, I don't know what I'm going to do if they raise my rent. If I have even $100 more, I will be homeless. If they add $100 more, I will be homeless. And those are our essential workers that are getting a very good hourly wage right now. We are really hitting a crisis point, and it needs to stop.
Jay, I know you want to move on, but I'll just underline that point. The alliance with United Food and Commercial Workers is exciting to me because I think, these are union workers who just actually won one of their biggest wage gains in their history in their recent contract negotiations just a couple months ago. And yet their members their shop stewards and their grocery stores are saying our members are being forced out of the city. Some are living out of their cars as they're going to work. Some are couch crashing on one another's couches. These are union workers who cannot afford to live in our city, who are being priced out by the 20% annual rent hikes that we're seeing right now. And so I think when we're getting to a point where I think this is not just an issue that's easy to otherize and push out to like, well, it's just the poor folks who don't normally have much influence and cultural cachet. But I think we're getting to a point where this is impacting a very, very large swath of working people in this city. And I think there's a basis to build a powerful movement linked with labor, linked with other community faith organizations to push for more fundamental change at the city level.
Well, thank you very much for the update, Ty. And again, please reach out to me if you'd like to request additional time in the agenda going forward. And we look forward to hearing from you at that time.
Appreciate it.
All right, so let's shift to our first dive into the topic of the costs of different types of shelter. So let me put into context why we have this on the agenda this week. At the end of last week's meeting, those who were able to attend the planning meeting were thinking that it would be good to put it into context, the relative costs of different types of shelter. And that set off a light bulb in my head that Garrett would be the perfect person to talk about the information that is embedded in the comprehensive plan, the shelter for all section that's at the end of the comprehensive plan, or the shelter plan, which does include some of those calculations. So without any more rambling from me, Garrett, why don't you take the floor?
Well, crap, Rob. I think I put the wrong presentation together. I thought we were just going to talk about general costs around homelessness, including shelter stuff. So you can have your choice of some general costs of other homeless things, or an ad hoc dive into shelter costs.
So what we were thinking about was really, and what you put together, I'm sure it would be great. So let's go down that road. And if there's additional questions, then we know where to get a hold of you to dive into the other
So I'll
details.
fly through my stuff and then I'll get to some shelter stuff. How about
Awesome.
that? All right. Sorry.
No, it's all good.
Okay. I'm going to share. intervention costs. It's all about the, oh, am I showing that? It's all about the money in some ways as we think about how to size our homeless system. And so I'm going to just kind of go through, in my mind, everyone that is advocating for homeless systems would benefit from having back of your pocket, how much does it cost to do X, Y, or Z? Costs matter because it helps us understand cost benefit ratios, and it helps us to plan for unmet need, right? We can't build a system if we don't know how much it costs. And even though talking together is a good thing, bringing money in to run the programs that we as a community have decided we need is important. There's a big danger though in talking just about money. And this is a picture of a lovely car. And if you're looking for a car, Lotus Esprit, Giugiaro design, I mean, beautiful, amazing, right? And if you want a supercar, it's cheap, but ownership experience is subpar. And so as we think about things that look really good, right, or seem like they're really inexpensive, sometimes it's worth digging into more. In the same scope, things that seem really expensive may be necessary. And so again, we're going to talk about cost, but try to understand that there's a lot of programs that need to be more expensive or can be operated less expensively. You know, we make decisions about things based on not just cost, but lots of other factors. So keep that in mind. We're going to talk about two kinds of money all the time. We're going to talk about capital and we're going to talk about operations. Capital is how much it costs to build facility or buy vehicles. All right, operations is my lump sum for everything: case management time, overhead costs, what it costs to pay your accountant to do the billings, right? All that kind of stuff sits into operations. And we typically have two different funding streams for those things. And strangely, at the county, we have pretty much never funded those two things together for a homeless program, which to me is worrisome as a way of kind of thinking about and doing business, right? Because it makes it hard to start new programs. So again, I'm going to fly through these interventions. We all know diversion, I hope, right? It's a one-time payment to help somebody exit homelessness. This is the only program we consider couch surfing a success. So diversion, it's like anything's better than being on the streets or in the shelter system. And so not anything, right? But this helps you get into permanent housing. It helps you relocate. It helps you stay with your aunt or something like that. It's about $1,500 for an intervention. I should have updated that slide, right? But so we have rent assistance costs associated with it. So typically we assist a family with direct financial assistance of about $750 to move in, sometimes much more, sometimes much less. And then we also have case management time. And that's sort of the overhead of doing all the work around that is that case management cost. So diversion is pretty inexpensive and it helps people that probably would get out of homelessness on their own get out faster. Our second big intervention is rapid rehousing. This is a national model. Basically, it says, let's get someone in a house, an apartment that they could afford in the future, and we'll cover rent until they're able to sustain it themselves. We typically pay about $6,500 in rent assistance over the period of time. So this isn't a one payment. This is over a set of months. This is all really useful for when we think about shelters and shelter costs, by the way, right? This requires housing available on the open market. So if there are not houses to rent for somebody, this is not a functional intervention for them. And we have about $3,500 of case management. Again, that's kind of all of the other operations other than the rent assistance. And typically a case manager will have around 15, 17 households at one time on their caseload. So it's about a $10,000 intervention, right? Again, put that in your back of your head, right? Diversion, $1,500, intervention, rapid rehousing is about $10,000. And again, that's a one-time for the household. And 60% of the time, households are successful. Most don't become homeless again. So it's a pretty good investment compared to something like a housing voucher. And housing voucher costs aren't something I'm super good with. So if somebody with a housing authority was like, Garrett, actually, that's a little higher now, I would believe you. But a housing voucher basically covers your rent. And there's an expectation of a third of your income going in, right? So a third of your income and the housing voucher covers the rest. And this is really good. There are a lot of households that do not need case management to stay housed. They just need housing subsidies, right? Because our housing is more expensive than their income, right? And the chances of them increasing their income, right? Thinking about people on SSI, SSDI, you know, folks that are starting their career, right? They do not have the ability to increase income dramatically. So, and this depends an awful lot on where you're renting, but $12,000 to $24,000 intervention a year. And I honestly don't know what the averages are. Depends on the household size, largely. Our third tool is basically the same as a housing voucher, except that it comes with case management, right? So not only does somebody need this intervention, right, to stay housed, they also need case management long-term, right? And the capital, you can use market rate housing, right? So Sharon Care House has a lot of this, Veterans Administration does a lot of this where they rent an apartment, they have a deal with a landlord, and they have a voucher, and they're not buying or building a project, they're just renting an apartment just like next to my house. And but you can also build, right? So your capital cost can be zero, or your capital cost can be $400,000 a unit, right? We're definitely getting in that range, $300,000 to $400,000 for a permanent supportive housing unit to build. And general market, right? One bedroom apartments are $250,000 a year to build, right? And then you've got rent assistance that you need coming in, right? That's your voucher. Oftentimes we have a separate stream that is a housing voucher through a housing authority. And then we offer case management, and that can differ from very low cost programs to others that are very expensive for a year. A lot depends on the needs, right? You need something different in family housing that has long-term clients than you do in a permanent supportive housing unit for young adults that basically needs to create a family environment and provide a lot more supports, and more people come through because people don't often need long-term permanent supportive housing as young adults. They just need it for a few years. Anyway, back to your pocket. I always put this around $20,000, $22,000 a year, permanent supportive housing intervention. And that brings us to shelter. Shelter can be widely different in how much it costs. Let's see, so per unit, if we do tiny house village, right? So tiny house village per unit, looking at about $12,000 a unit. And that's about $5,000 to construct a tiny house, or a little less if you're putting a tent up. But then you have a lot of other costs around toilets and sanitation, facilities, you know, clothes washers, showers, a tent for people to prepare food, office space for staff to meet with clients, right? So all of that infrastructure. So a 65 unit tiny house village is probably going to come in around $800,000 to construct. And that's based on somewhat stability site costs and current projects that Lehigh has been doing in Pierce County and other projects around the country, right? So, but you need a lot of money to run a shelter, and that's where things get kind of expensive. So, and this is per bed, right? So you're looking at running per bed for a year, and we don't typically have shelter guests that last a whole year. Currently, like our tiny house villages, our shelter guests are staying 220 days, right? So a little bit over 6 months. And a lot of those have negative outcomes, right? They're moving out to homelessness again, but a lot of them are having positive outcomes, right? So, but that's around $22,000. Now, so bed night is what we typically talk about costs around shelters. And so bed nights, so you're looking at a tiny house village, you're looking around $55 or $60 per bed night. And you're going to find something lower when you do a less expensive facility, and that kind of has like different needs, I guess. So like, or scale, I guess scale really is it, right? So you look at Nativity House running 167 people, their overnight staff isn't dramatically bigger than the overnight staff at a 65 unit tiny house village. So scale oftentimes gets you a lower cost, right? So Nativity House or the Rescue Mission, they're running $35, maybe $40 at the most per bed night. So they run less expensive because of their scale. And also most of these, we typically expect no rent ever being paid, right? On our shelters, typically we expect them to be something we find capital funding for. And what you put in a site, right, affects the cost. So my tiny house village costs about $1.5 million to run in a year. If I'm running about 65 folks. And that so that $55 buys program generalists, right? So they provide site security, check people in, check people out, right? Take care of problems, case management, right? And we want a less than 20-to-1 ratio, right? So you want it at most 20 clients per case manager. And we also want to have on-site case manager or on-site behavioral health, right? So our goal would be to have people that want to engage in behavioral health at least, or no more than 20 clients per behavioral health staff. So whether that's peers or whether it's MHP, mental health professional would be desirable. That's expensive, right? That's $100,000 a year plus probably $120,000 a year to bring a mental health professional on site, right? So you kind of add those costs in. So you can have a super inexpensive site that doesn't have an awful lot of services, or you can have it much more expensive. And I'm just going to say there's oftentimes a myth of bringing other folks into a site to provide services, and that's largely a myth. People, if you want services on site, you basically need to be paying for them or contracting for someone to bring them on site. It's not completely true, but in the way of thinking about it, I think that's a good way to think. So my wrap up here, hopefully I've anchored this shelter stuff enough, right? It's all different ways of thinking about it. So again, diversion, right, is $1,500 compared to $20,000 for a shelter intervention for a year. So if you did 6 months of that, right, you'd be talking 10,000, right? So I could put someone in a shelter for $10,000, or I could put them in an apartment for $10,000 and hopefully have a path to them being independent. Our limitation is it's too expensive, right? And there aren't enough units right now for that to be as effective as it is in places like Houston or in New Orleans that have a lot more housing stock available, or Cleveland, right? And so that's when we often compare approaches in different communities, it needs to be within the context of what's actually possible. So I'm advocating more money on shelter, even though financially it doesn't look as effective, right? And it's not as good for our people, but the reality is we don't have the housing for that to be successful. And ignore that. And the other thing is just like, the Lotus was lovely at the beginning. We need a lot of different types of shelter, right? So we need different models, and some will be more expensive. Medical respite shelter will be more expensive because we'll have medical care on site, and we'll have other things that'll be less expensive because that set of clients doesn't need something, right? So this is a picture with all different types of cars and transportation, right? And that is just sort of this idea of what our shelter system needs to look diverse, because we have lots of different folks and lots of different needs. I'll do a better chart next time with what you actually asked for, Rob.
No, that's good. And I would expect we'll have some questions from folks. I really like your mention of the continuum of options for shelter, the need for a diversity of options, because I understand from this presentation, you can see the temptation to want to create more congregate shelter because it's less expensive to maintain and run over time. But the challenge we have, of course, is that sometimes many people don't want to access congregate shelter, so then we don't end up actually addressing the issue on the streets.
I'm going to jump in. So there's a question about safe parking. And so one way you can build a model is not having 24/7 staffing. And basically safe parking functions that way. You could even say safe parking or tiny house village with less than 5 households, right? Like that small, you probably don't, and you're vetting, and you probably don't need on-site. So you're going to drop your cost dramatically, right? To the tune of, $7,000 a year or something like that, right? You can dramatically from 20,000, right? Or even less. And so, right, that's a super effective. And again, a lot depends on whether you're bringing, something like a $200,000 shower trailer and toilet setup in, right? Or you're using an existing bathroom within a church or a facility, right? So there's some other elements to that can make it less expensive. But most of safe parking in our system, cost savings has to do with very small projects that don't require 24/7 supervision, which is what people in encampments ask for, by the way, right? We don't want security because we want it. We want security because that's been something routinely identified by people living in encampments as a high priority for them.
Yep. Let's see, folks with questions. I am seeing content in the chat. Other folks with questions that they'd like to ask live rather than in chat?
So there was a comment about Lehigh's model or tiny homes versus micro. I just use it as it's a blanket term for non-congregate living situation, and as a temporary, right? So not a permanent option. I like them permanent too. They tend to be 200,000 a unit is what we're seeing permanent tiny house micro homes, right? But that it's just sort of a catch-all for a non-congregate space. And a lot, honestly, the space that we construct doesn't matter. I think it's a high priority to be non-congregate for sleeping, but whether that's rooms in a building or tiny house units or micro homes, from a cost perspective, right, other than the capital to construct, they're fairly similar to operate.
Jay, I see your hand up.
So if you cut the cost of night staff, could you put in, let's say theoretically, a program that's volunteer to step into stipend, to step into a program that helps you get employment and use those hours for a reference period so that they have a reference to add to a resume per se and a background to help them get employment? Could they do something like that instead? And that way they drop their costs, but they're raising their chance of employment at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, from a funding perspective, we'll fund anything that an agency thinks is going to work well, specifically if it has workforce development baked into it and lower cost of operation, right? Like we would prefer those things, certainly, right? I mean, you want something sustainable and is going to be, ethical for the people there and all of that. But, honestly, there's an element to how we operate as a funder, which is a little hands off on things. So we try not to dictate means and methods as a government funder, but absolutely those would be ridiculously competitive as funding becomes available.
Thanks for that question, Jay. And Sally?
Eric, can you note on your presentation the options that rely on an available supply of housing in the broader community? I think you said rapid rehousing and probably housing vouchers are two of those. And if those options rely on that available housing and we don't have any available housing, then those options are not very robust at the present time. And I think people need to understand that if what I'm saying is true.
It's interesting because what you're saying is true. However, we also, as a homeless system, exit about 2,000 people into permanent housing every year through the open market, right? So diversion and rapid rehousing continue to be successful. We just think they're less successful because of that saturation point. So it works, but it's limited, right? Like but if you give me $30 million, say, for instance, I don't want to buy a 100-unit apartment building, right? I can do an awful lot more with $30 million in terms of, working the private market in a way. Like that's what I feel a little bit. It's like, so investing direct money into buying units is a lot of money that we need to develop that flow in. So I'm not saying we don't do that, but what do we do now is an interesting question.
Thank you.
And let's see, Alfred, you have your hand up, and then Courtney.
Okay. One thing that I've noticed, and mainly also due to personal experience, is that they basically have more or less eliminated an entire class of housing, which is like, say, your residential hotels and things like that, which are low barrier to entry and things like that. And the cities have said, that they're nuisances and all that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how all those have gone away. And there's a chapter in a book I read that talked an awful lot about just, it wasn't, no one intentionally kind of made all of those go away, but it's been, kind of, actually it was in the terrible book called San Francisco, which is not worth reading, and yet I'm glad to have read it. But they had a really interesting coverage of the disappearance of the single room occupancies in San Francisco. Yeah, not good use of data in that book, like a little twisted, however, like also good. I don't know.
Thanks for that perspective, Alfred. And Courtney, why don't you wrap us up?
Thanks. I hear you, Garrett, when you say you think you could do more in the private market with $30 million, but the long-term impact is you can't control the rents. So I would like more data. I would like to see more data crunching on like expropriation and into social housing units, and maybe even calculating how much of what a vacancy tax could do to mitigate some of the costs. So I am more interested in public ownership than private market work. So I'd like to see more on that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I agree. Like the money we need to have going into affordable housing, right? The scope of it is important to talk in terms of, right? Like we need a plan to bring 100 million a year, 500 million a year into Pierce County, into, right, public ownership, right? And that's a long-term process of getting that revenue stream, right? Even identifying that we actually buying in that we need it. And so I guess I just have this shorter term hope of being able to serve more in our community while we do that at the same time. That maybe it's hard to know which side. It's hard to know the right thing to do. So I appreciate these conversations.
That describes so much of what we're working toward and working for. So it is hard to know what the right thing is to do. Patricia, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I don't want to take too much time, but I think it needs to be like a plural situation. I think it needs that the private market tends to make houses quicker and more available than getting caught up in the government. But like to have like a government way to keep that rent stabilized is also quite important. I don't know, but yeah, it's a bigger conversation, but thank you for letting me share.
Thanks, Patricia. So, Garrett, thank you for the presentation. For folks who I saw Jenny said she was having a hard time downloading it when it was dropped in the chat. I presume, could you put this on the coalition's website, Garrett, when you get a chance?
Sure. And actually, I'm going to send it out to the listserv right now.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, but I'll get it up with the meeting notes.
Perfect. All right. And this background information is good to have and always good to hear on every now and then to see how the numbers have been updated. And I did post the link to the comprehensive plan to end homelessness. There is information about the costs of different types of shelter in the appendices to that as well. So that may be some good additional information if you really want to geek out on it. Zev, your hand's up.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention really quickly that there are like estimated 15 million vacant homes in the US while people are like on the street homeless. So if anything, it seems the private market is extremely good at keeping the housing stock as limited as possible.
Well, and when housing is a commodity, there's a value in holding on to it. Whether it's, capitalism's fun. So let's shift gears. Why don't we take a few moments to have Timothy review what we learned from last week's breakout conversation, and then we will have some government updates and come back to this week's breakout conversation. So Timothy, you want me to share that document?
Yes, please.
All right.
And I just dropped it into the chat as well.
Okay.
So that people can download it if you prefer that. So last week we talked about what can we do to better serve people living in vehicle homes in King County. As always, there was a ton of great thinking that revealed itself in the 10 minutes that we had to talk about it. And I'll just, sort of run through the ideas quickly. Some of it was, relatively generic stuff that we're used to seeing. Needs to be more funding, ensuring safety of vehicle dwellers, things like that. Safe parking sites, KOA type places in the county, helping churches to use their facilities to host safe parking, things like that that have been discussed quite a bit. There was an idea that came up in a number of groups simultaneously, which was kind of interesting, which was about creating some sort of a project that brings together people who have skills to help repair trailers, or not trailers, RVs and such, because that's a continuous need. So there was an idea of, kind of formalizing something to address that. Related thing that was more focused on the kind of cosmetic presentation of RVs and maybe getting arts funding around that. Long shot, but an interesting idea nonetheless. Something that people talked about during the call last time was just a reminder that people living in RVs often need the same types of support that people living in tents are. Don't overlook RVs when we're handing out water and things like that. There was a kind of a constellation of ideas around helping people prepare for homelessness, for vehicle living, assembling tips for people who were living in their vehicles, trying to get that information together in a more coordinated way. Some ideas for best practices, training outreach workers on connecting with vehicle living communities, researching models of managed safe parking lots for RVs. There was a mention of a Santa Barbara safe parking procedures manual. I found a link for that I put down in the resources. It's a little expensive. It's $150 to order it. So if anyone has it and wants to share it, you might want to pop that in the chat. There were some other additional comments that arose that didn't really fit in the main category. Some of it was about just, the contracts around outreach. And it also reflected some of the discussion that was on the call last week about funding up front so that nonprofits don't have to carry the expenses so much. Having people with lived experience informing those contracts to make them more on point. There was a comment about, kind of the coordinated entry triage problem, how it leaves people in the middle without the services that they need. There was the ever popular private property expropriation suggestion, and a call for applying landlord mitigation kind of techniques to vehicle living and seeing if there were any things there that we could draw from. And then there's just a list of links that people mentioned that I assembled at the end of the document. So that's pretty much what was said.
Thank you again, Timothy. That's great information. You make the time we spend together in those 10 minutes more valuable with pulling this together. So
thank you so much.
All right. So as I mentioned, we will go to government updates now and then come back to do our breakout for this week. So let's take a look at those government updates. Caleb from the city of Tacoma. This is his day off. However, he did email me today with updated information regarding the upcoming hot weather and what's going to be available across the city of Tacoma in the next week. That information is included on the hot weather page that I'm updating. And again, you can link to that from the pchomeless.org site. So that's what I have from the city of Tacoma this week. Jeff Rogers from Pierce County is actually in a meeting with the department, or with the Pierce County Department of Emergency Management right now. So let me paste into the chat what he sent me earlier in the meeting. He did pop in briefly. His update was that they're planning right now for the inclement weather next week. They have scheduled morning briefings with street outreach teams and emergency shelter providers on Monday through Thursday to address the issue. And meeting invites have been sent. If you didn't receive that meeting invite and you would like to attend that meeting, just email Jeff at the address listed below. So that's an update from Pierce County. Not sure if I don't see Valerie on the call. Anything that comes to mind, Lori, that we should update about the rental assistance?
Yeah, the portal closes on August 1st. So everybody needs to know that. It's still available until then for people to apply. It's still, and it has to be COVID related. Landlords also have to participate, but you can still apply. And you can update, like you can get into the portal to update information. Let's see. And they'll continue to process the applications they received up to the point where they close the portal, and then they'll work on the new applications that came in since then. So it's still happening. You can still contact them via email. I believe it's hsritz at whatever the Pierce County thing is. So that is happening. That's important there. And I think Valerie's run over this before. The county is working on a new permanent rental assistance program that will have some built-in kind of conditions that hopefully will make it successful and reduce fraud, which is kind of a big concern right now. So that's mostly what I know about rental assistance.
Yeah. Thanks, Lori.
Yeah,
and I do know Valerie emailed to the mailing list here a week or so ago about the portal closing. So that's a good reminder. Jenny from Tacoma Pierce County Health Department, what do you have to share with us this week?
Good morning, everyone. Casual Friday for me today in my hoodie and glasses, so forgive me, but just couldn't do it this morning. I hope everyone is doing well. I know folks are really thinking about heat right now, rightfully so, but just in terms of our ongoing COVID situation, community transmission level is steady, but at a higher rate than it's been with this new subvariants that we have out in the community. Very good idea to be wearing masks in crowded spaces. Fortunately, our hospitalizations and deaths remain low. We do, unfortunately, have shelter outbreaks right now. So we're working on getting vaccine clinics up and running again. Vaccine is really the best protection. I think a lot of people are hearing about vaccinated community members or friends getting sick recently. So that's a true thing that we're all sort of seeing, I think. But it's important to remember that vaccination actually means that you're much, much less likely to become seriously ill and end up in the hospital. So that's how vaccines work. They don't, keep us from getting any sort of virus, but they keep us from getting very sick. So really, really key. There's a new vaccine coming out soon called Novavax, which you may have heard of. It is not an mRNA vaccine. So for folks who have concerns about the mRNA technology, this is maybe an alternative. We have our Test to Treat program, which offers free medical consultation and treatment medications for folks who test positive, who are at high risk. So I will, when I share all my links, I'll share that with you all. I have been delivering masks a little bit to some shelters on Monday. I'd love to make sure the cooling centers have masks. So I've reached out to the contacts I do have. If you're on the call and you are from Tacoma Public Library or Pierce County Library System, I don't have contacts there. So if anybody does, let me know. And I've been emailing with Jeff and Ivan. And now that I know that they're in a meeting together, as we would expect, I know why they're not getting back to me right away. So anyhow, would really love to make sure that those folks have masks, since there's going to be people coming inside to stay cool. So we'll be working on that. I have some other updates to share in the chat regarding our isolation and quarantine capacity. I've talked about that in recent meetings. So hopefully you've gotten my meeting updates and my emails. And I'm also going to share something about monkeypox, which we've still got very low numbers here in Pierce County, but is a concern for us, and want folks on this call to be aware. And if you're working in congregate settings, to be aware of how that is spread. And I'll share a nice CDC one-pager that you can read, share with your staff, to raise awareness and also to post. Are there questions or concerns for me?
Not seeing any.
Measles vaccine, interesting. Yeah, you may have seen in the news this morning that there was a case of polio in a young adult in New York. So that is, the hits just keep coming. Get vaccinated, folks.
Yeah, as I understand it, that was an unvaccinated individual, right?
Unvaccinated kiddo who, yep. Yes. So if there aren't questions or comments from me, I'm also invited Rihanna Betancourt from the health department. She's in environmental health, and hopefully she is here to talk a little bit about our department's efforts at coordination and materials development around heat and what's going on with that. So I'll turn it over to Rihanna. A lot of you will remember Rihanna. She used to attend these meetings quite a bit. Yep. So thanks, Rihanna.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing this space with me, Jenny. Hi, all. It's been a while since I've been here. We have some heat stuff to share with the acknowledgement that I know that it is not enough for the unhoused population, but we feel better this year than we did last year about where we're at internally with this work. So I'm gonna paste a few things in the chat. Our Keep Cool webpage. We just were allowed to, not allowed to, but we just got a new infographic made, heat exhaustion versus heat stroke. Will be available to download on the top 8 languages. It can be downloaded and printed and handed out at community events or during outreach. And also our newest blog just came out just a few minutes ago. The translations might not be in the webpage yet. They're being worked on at this very moment. So that's that. I have some few sort of high level updates, more maybe shared by my supervisor during the emergency briefing meetings this next week, but it looks like the Pierce County Cooling Center page is going to be live today, and I just looked at it and they've got some updates on there now, but not cooling centers yet, but those will be there. Transit is waiting for emergency management to finalize theirs. They will then update their messaging around free rides and whatever else they may offer. Our environmental health team received some funding a few months ago from the Department of Health to do a draft heat action plan. And that funding has allowed us to focus more on this work. We want to do a lot of this stuff and just haven't had the capacity to do it. And so it has allowed us to do quite a bit in the last couple of months. And also our own internal heat response plan. So sort of developing, you know, what actions are we doing internally during a heat watch? What are we doing during a warning? And so we're in the process of developing those at this point, but a heat response plan is being worked on to determine when we would activate to a off normal or a low, maybe to prompt others around the county to maybe try and do it a little bit sooner. Because we recognize that the day of is not, it just doesn't work well. So short term, we want a lower threshold than DEM has. So they have a 90 degrees for 3 days before they'll activate. We want to do it sooner. So we're looking at that. We're looking at what King County Public Health has done. We're also looking at the Northwest or the National Weather Service sort of guidance. We haven't made decisions yet. We know it's going to be lower though, probably 85. Long term, of course, would be a heat action plan for, you know, where we would make recommendations about what we think based on heat health information, what we think this, you know, specific government entity might do differently or sooner and things like that. So we would make a lot of recommendations around health information. And then also we're in the process of developing environmental assessments for long-term care facilities and shelters to help assess preparedness for our air quality and heat events. And so that's really exciting to me. They will be in an electronic format, but also can be printed. At some point, we're obtaining a staff person that can be in our environmental health program that is sort of like a Jenny, but in environmental health and like specific to our, like if we have a smoke event or something, that person would be a direct liaison. So those are my updates. One more, we are advocating for government organizations to move quicker and sooner. That's it.
Thank you, Rihanna. Thank you very much. I do see, Paula, you have your hand up. Is it related to a question for these folks?
Yes, just real quick. I was going to ask Rihanna if you know if the health department has any funding for advertising for when we have these heat events to partner with Pierce Transit, because we all know that they're going to offer free rides. But again, unless we're posting something in the shelters, the bus shelters, on the buses themselves, if they're not running that ticker tape, you know, electronic thing across the back, or have some sort of thing on Pierce Transit buses that alerts people that there are free rides for the week of whatever it is, or for the next 3 days, you're missing a lot of people. We can't always get, as service providers, the information out to everybody that's on the street. and literally with temps reaching close to 100 next week, potentially, that could be a life-saving thing to get on a bus with air conditioning and take them to a cooling center. So I'm just wondering how we can all partner together to get that, get that word out. That's my comment.
Yeah, that's great information, Paula. Thank you for bringing that up. I mean, they do like a news release on their webpage and then some social media stuff, but that's not, that's not enough. So I will take this back to our heat action plan lead, and we can have the conversations with Pierce Transit and see what can happen around that. But thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for all the great updates, and it's good to see you again, Rihanna. All right, so let's shift over to have our breakout conversation for today. So the topic that we wanted to consider today ties in directly to what we're seeing on the streets with all of these sweeps, especially within the city of Tacoma. There's been a lot of frustration on the parts not only of those who are being displaced all the time and facing the repeated trauma, but on the part of those of us who are in this meeting and folks who are advocating for those who are being displaced. So we thought it'd be healthy to have a networking conversation for a few minutes this morning about what are some other ways, different ways that coalition members can respond to the ongoing sweeps. I'm sure there will be some entertaining, some constructive, some entertaining ideas of what folks can do. So let me open the rooms here. I'm going to put everybody, just like usual, into breakout rooms of 5 or 6 folks. And why don't we spend, because we're of course behind on our agenda again, why don't we spend 10 minutes, so we'll go until about 10:33-ish, considering this conversation. And please, someone take notes, paste them in the chat when you get back here. And away we go. Welcome back, everybody. Folks are gradually making their way back into the room here.
We needed more time, Rob.
That's always the case. 2 hours just gets shorter every week. I don't know how that happens. So hopefully that was a good conversation, even though it wasn't the 15 minutes I originally had planned. So I do think we did about 12 minutes. As a reminder, if you did take notes during the session, please paste them into the chat so that Timothy can do his magic with them next time. And let's see, I'm glancing real quick at the chat. Lavada, I'm sorry that the time was short. And please do reach out to me with a direct message regarding your other concern there. So let's shift to the final items of our meeting. We've got about 26 minutes left in today's meeting. And I just wanted to do some brief advocacy updates. First, I wanted to do a thank you to Sally for flagging what's on the agenda for the City of Tacoma's Community Vitality and Safety Committee this next week. That meeting is on Thursday at 4:30 p.m. The agenda is not actually posted on the city's website yet that I saw, but Sally had the info by other means that they're going to talk about possible changes to tenant protections in Tacoma. So that's something that we're very interested in as a coalition. If you have the time to attend, that could be a good thing to do. This next week's Tacoma City Council study session doesn't include any updates related to homelessness. However, during their regular meeting on Tuesday night, there is a recognition. I don't have details about what's included in the recognition, didn't have time to track that down, but a recognition related to youth and young adults experiencing homelessness. They're also, for those who are paying attention to the process to select a new person to serve on the city council, the selection of finalists for that appointment will take place at the end of Tuesday night's meeting as well. So those things are there. Otherwise, anything, Sally, that I missed or that you would add for advocacy this week?
I haven't had a chance to check the county stuff yet, so nope.
Yeah, that's always my standing saying here is that the county updates their agendas for next week on Friday afternoon. So the timing is pretty poor for giving those updates here, but if there is anything critical, we can send it to the mailing list. So that's quick updates for advocacy. Let's shift over, and Jan, would you like to do updates for Safe Sites for All committee?
We're concentrating on the weather at this point. I am pleased to announce that Nourish Food Banks has offered several pallets of water, and they have offered, because in the big logistic picture, it's not just getting the donation, it's how to get that individual donation to the end user. Nourish has also donated warehouse space and a truck and driver. So I had kind of hoped that with 2021 having two major weather events, where this coalition was the essential bridge between services and donated goods, getting to the population that needed them, that the county would have included us in planning for what's going to happen next week. Apparently they're having a meeting now, and we've not been invited to the table. That being said, we do know that we have built up our resources. Everybody in this room has some connection to folks who live unsheltered. We need to know who the outreach folks are who want to know where to get water and any other supplies that might be donated. Rob is basically our communication guy. He is keeping the website updated with sites. The sites are possible, each site has some restrictions possibly. For instance, Stability site has lots of water that has been provided by the city of Tacoma, but it's only for folks within the city of Tacoma. The beauty of Stability site, however, is that it's open 24/7 because there's somebody at the gate. The other sites that are available don't have 24/7 connection. For instance, St. Vincent de Paul has water. They're not available on Sunday, and New Hope in Puyallup has water. They're not necessarily open on weekends. Lehigh on Hosmer and Lehigh on 60 Proctor, they're open, and the water that's been donated to them is not restricted. So my suggestion is that you go to the website to find out where these places are, and anybody, volunteer or professional, has access to this water. It has been donated. So LEC, Lived Experience Coalition, you've got folks that go out. We heard from Zev. Zev knows folks in the previously known group Food Not Bombs or whatever. I mean, anybody, casual or professional. Last year, we even had fire department folks who had to come to us because nobody else had anything available. So yes, Brotherhood Rise has been a critical part of both the weather response and response in general to poverty. Bless their hearts. So
Jan,
yes.
So I just had a quick direct message from Jeff Rogers that he has been able to join the call, and he can do a little more update about what the county has planned. He's of course coming here straight from the DEM meeting that he was just attending. So let's carve out some space for him to do that update, if that works.
Absolutely. So I will put my phone number in the chat, but Rob is going to keep the website current as to locations. As I say, some locations have restrictions as far as hours or population. And I want to have a big message for everybody. If you go out to see folks who are living homeless, you are not just bringing bottled water, which may prevent a 911 call. You are actually doing a welfare check. It has been shown that when people are shown respect and just the human touch of connection, they do better. Okay, so you've got a bottled water and a smile and a hang in there message. Okay, I defer to Jeff.
Hello, sorry, I'm on my cell phone. My computer volume isn't working. People can't hear me. I can hear you, but they can't hear me. Yes, good morning. Sorry I wasn't able earlier, but I've been for the last hour and a half in various meetings planning for inclement weather next week and the county's response. What I can share is that plans are moving forward with opening cooling centers. Number is to be determined and locations are to be determined, but some locations have been thrown out were Parkland, Fife, Gig Harbor area. They're not set in stone. We'll determine where they're going to be. The plan is that folks can access public transportation on Pierce Transit and have a free bus ride if they just were to share with the bus driver that they're going to a cooling center, and that cooling center is in the path they're going. They will allow people to get on the bus free, have access to those cooling centers. They're planning to be open from like noon till 8 p.m., which covers the warmest time of the day. Temperature is supposed to get down into the 60s in the evening, which is a lot cooler. And so the plan is that they'll open at noon, 8 p.m. We are having daily briefings next week. We've invited those who have requested to be a part of them, but specifically our outreach providers and our emergency shelter providers to come together and have a discussion about what they're doing, what they're not able to do, who could pitch in here, pitch in there, and coordinating this work. What can shelters do? That type of a thing, so that we're trying to coordinate together in this work. We're aware of what the city of Tacoma is doing. I'll leave it for them to share what they're doing. We're aware of what the coalition's doing. We'll leave it to the coalition to share what they're doing with their water distribution and things. There was a quick question that just popped up about how will folks know that they can access a bus? Well, the hope is that outreach workers are out in the community, distributing water, providing information, and are starting as soon as they can to share with people that these sites will be open. They'll only be open currently Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Those are the 3 severe weather days that are projected currently. Possibility, depending how the weather may shift or whatever and be hotter on Friday or whenever, that it could be expanded. But currently plans are for next Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. That's the 26th, 27th, and 28th, based on the current weather forecast. So we're relying on folks who have contact with Unsheltered to share that word with folks. And we should have identified by Monday all of the locations and start setting those up so that they're open by noon on Tuesday. Ideally, what I heard was they're looking to maybe use some school facilities in different areas of the county. There's good partnership between our DEM, which will be activated. DEM is activated for this inclement weather cycle we have and will be open, and we will have staff from our homeless team at the DEM working with DEM staff in addressing this weather situation. Our meetings that we're doing each day starting Monday as a first planning one is at 8 a.m. If you don't have an invite already and you want to be engaged, you can send me an email I believe Rob may have already shared my email with you. I sent him a message earlier this morning in between some meetings to let him know where I was at. Please email me and I can make sure that you get added to the email list to be a part of that discussion with our outreach teams, emergency shelter teams, and those teams that do outreach work that we don't contract with, but are out there in the community doing outreach work. We'd love to have you involved as well. I'm the contact currently. My boss is out of town next week in Washington, D.C. So if you have any questions or concerns regarding inclement weather, you could email me those as well. And I'll coordinate and work with the appropriate people here at Pierce County to address any emails or concerns that come our way. Sorry, was there confusion regarding the 9 a.m.? It is 9 a.m. Did I say 8 a.m.? Sorry. I'm in multiple meetings come Monday, and some are with DEM or some are with our outreach and street workers. So the street outreach and the emergency shelter work is at 9 a.m. in the invite. Adhere to the invite, which is 9 a.m., not 8 a.m. Sorry. Too many things going on and just a lot of conversation over the last 2 hours, basically, here this morning. I'd entertain any questions anyone may have real quickly.
Let's see. I don't see anybody's hand going up yet. Oh, there's Jan.
Okay.
I know, the dreaded Jan. I am so sorry.
Oh, we love you, and we love you. We appreciate you.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall. Is anybody from the coalition invited to the EOC for during the DEM activation?
I will ask that question. I will let you know.
One question that I had, Jeff, so I've been maintaining a page linked from the top of the coalition's website with hot weather resources, essentially. I'm happy to continue to do that, but if the county is going to create something, I'm glad to switch over to pointing to that from our website as well. So as we get into it on Monday, let me know and I can make that flip that switch.
We will be providing, we can provide a link to our website, our communication staff in our department, as well as our communication staff out of our communication division under our executive's office were involved in our meeting this morning, and they're creating a countywide response through pushing it out through social media and all their different networks and things they do and posting it on our website. I can make sure that you get that link, Rob, if you want to be able to share that.
Perfect.
link.
Yeah, perfect. Let's see. Jenny has her hand up.
Hey, Jeff. I sent you an email, but just wanted to say that I'd like to make sure that the cooling centers have masks. Yeah, I'm reaching out and getting a hold of some folks and getting confirmation that they do, but just keep me in the loop. And I'm hoping that Ivan can plug in there from DEM.
Ivan is one of the staff we're working with the DEM. Awesome. So I'll just shoot a message and remind myself about that.
Absolutely.
And ensure that we coordinate something and maybe get some masks. Yeah, I don't know what their status is of having availability of masks themselves, but we could make sure that's part of it.
I have surplus too, and I'm happy to deliver. But yeah, just you see your email. I've connected with the two of you there, so if you want to reply to that, that's cool. Just wanted to put a bug in your ear about that. Thanks.
Great. Thanks.
Jan, is your hand still up from before or something new?
Something new. Niagara just donated some water that Nourish is going to store. So Jeff, as you're doing these planning sessions, folks go to different websites to find about what's going on. So when we as a coalition donate water or have these networks set up, it is open to everybody and we want to get the word out, but we don't want to be in competition with government systems that are posting things. So what is the best way that we can share the information of water being available and all those things? Because right now we're going to be up to like 6 pallets of water at Nourish warehouse. So I mean, you don't even know that from the county because this all happened within the last 24 hours.
Yeah, what we do have in any updates would be appreciated. We've been notified of the locations of your water being in Puyallup, 86 and Hosmer in the Proctor district. And we're going to put that on our website so that staff know that that's available for them to access. So if you have updates and want to share them with me, I could make sure that they get onto our county website, because as the county, we're trying to share everything we know to help everyone along the way. And this just isn't, as a department, for us dealing with unsheltered homeless. It's also dealing with low-income folk and seniors and disabled folk who are housed and don't have air conditioning, and trying to address things from that avenue as part of our department as well. So yeah, we're making it broader. So we'd love to have any information you want us to share, we're willing to share.
And Teresa, your hand's up.
Dan, Jeff Rogers never said, I never say anything I don't mean. And when I say I appreciate you, I truly appreciate you. That's an honor. I don't say that to a lot of people, but I definitely will say that to you. Teresa.
So first, I appreciate you and the work you're doing on this, Jeff. And I'm wondering, how is it going with hearing from municipalities about what they're doing? The county is sort of coordinating this whole response to the heat. And I'm wondering, is Tacoma communicating really well with you? Is Puyallup, are other municipalities telling you what they're doing so that you can have all of that compiled in one place? Or do we still need to have a page on our site that has links to several different versions?
Well, because our DEM is activating, this is activating the DEM cycle, and that there are DEM representation in different jurisdictions across the county. So they'll be reaching out to those jurisdictions and understanding what they're doing. And I have a briefing on Monday morning with DEM again regarding all of this, and coordinating with all of the smaller jurisdictions, because smaller jurisdictions don't all have the same threshold. But what I've tried to convince our DEM is, well, great that they don't have the same threshold, but based on the weather forecast I've seen next week, I'm pretty sure that the forecast, all of the jurisdictions, this will impact them by their threshold. I'm seeing temperatures between 90 and 100 degrees in what I'm seeing next week. And yeah, Tacoma has an 85-degree temperature, but I think based on what's forecast, it's going to impact every jurisdiction. So we'll know more on Monday. And we'll be planning all day Monday to be able to respond on Tuesday. And in the past, many jurisdictions have worked, and we can share this information within their jurisdiction to provide something within their jurisdiction that's additional and above and beyond anything that Pierce County may be doing. We've had communication with Tacoma because they're very proactive and they have lower thresholds with this weather degree or temperature. So we are aware of what they are doing. We're slowly reaching out through DEM to those other DEM partners to figure out what all those other jurisdictions will be doing. And we'll share information.
I hope going forward, there will be some way of tying the release of funding for certain things to cities actually making information available for our citizens of Pierce County, and so that there can be one place that people can go and not have it all in bits and pieces. It also will help us to know where the gaps are, because right now we don't have really any idea. When you talk about the small municipalities doing something or other, if we know they're doing it, we can release the concern about it. But if we don't, you're going to get duplication. And that's just not reasonable when we are a whole county that should be working together.
I understand, but it's a process. And we've never planned an inclement weather this far in advance, to be honest with you. So starting as early as we did earlier this week is a first for us. So we're improving, we're doing better. But we have to give those jurisdictions the opportunity to respond. And that coordination is done from a Department of Emergency Management perspective, from DEM to DEM. So you're fortunate to have staff in Human Services dedicated to this unsheltered homeless work, staff from City of Tacoma that are dedicated to this unsheltered work. But when we deal with all the other jurisdictions, it's coordination between DEMs, unfortunately, because they're not as engaged and involved in the homeless work as the City of Tacoma and Pierce County.
And I appreciate that you're working on that.
Yeah.
There was definitely. I want to acknowledge that we're in a much better place going into next week than we were a year ago. So we definitely appreciate that. Any final things you want to add, Jeff, before we
one more
work
quick
to
thing.
wrap up our meeting?
Last year during the inclement weather in the summer, there were some water purveyors or water districts, have whatever word you want to use, that opened up their spigots at their facilities for people to come and fill water jugs and that kind of a thing. Our DEM is reaching out to some of those water purveyors throughout the county to see if they would make those resources available. And yes, homeless people could go there, outreach teams could go there, anybody that needs water could go there. And we kind of focus on that so that seniors and disabled folk or lower income folk who don't have access to water could potentially get access to water through those water districts, water purveyors, and have that resource. No guarantee yet, but many of them have been reached out to. We just haven't heard back a response.
Great. Well, I'm assuming we'll hear that update in those daily check-in calls that start next week. So
yeah, and I'm taking two things away real quickly. I'm taking the question about the coalition at the DEM, and Rob, a link to our PC websites to you. If I've missed something else that's needed from me, those are the two takeaways I have, unless there's something else.
Nope, I think that's it. Oh, Jan's got her hand up.
Jeff, also take back the note that when you're looking for public water systems, spigots that would be available to outreach teams and the public, St. Vincent de Paul is willing to set aside reusable water bottles.
I did see that message. Yes. I will share that as well.
Great. So, Jeff, I'm glad you're able to jump on the call. This is really important content for next week's heat emergency that we have approaching. We've burned up our time for today's meeting. So very briefly, does anybody have any announcements for the good of the order that we'd like to share before we wrap up? Jan.
An example of how this coalition works well. Wednesday, there was a sweep. Several of us, the call went out throughout the coalition to show up at the sweep. By the way, Timothy Harris is a lot taller in person than he is on Zoom. That being the case, went to the sweep. There were options by the city of Tacoma. The police were there, but the HEAL team was there. And there were options given to folks. We know that they're not desirable options necessarily or even realistic, but the HEAL team did get some people to agree to go to different shelter options. We know that not everybody would necessarily trust the police. The HEAL team asked me to take an individual woman down to the stability site because the site had been procured in advance with planning. And I was able to take a woman from 7th to Tacoma via the HEAL team's respectful interaction with her, down to the stability site where for sure she had a better, safer environment. So I just want to say it takes all of us. The itty bitty piece that you think you do, it's not itty bitty. It takes all of us to do the networking.
Thanks for sharing that, Jan. And that is a perfect way to wrap up today's meeting. Count our blessings and our successes and talk about those here every week. So I want to thank everybody for being here. I see, Zev, you have your hand up before we wrap up.
Yeah, so I put it in the chat earlier, but in case people were interested, we have a community meeting to discuss the Home in Tacoma for All campaign on Monday at 7 p.m. At the 350 Tacoma building. You can also find that information on our website.
Fantastic.
Social media.
All right. And on that note, I wish everybody a safe weekend and enjoy your preparations for the coming heat blast. And for those who have an interest in the ability to hang in here for the planning for next week's meeting, we'll do that here in about 5 minutes. Otherwise, to everybody else, have a good weekend.